Hi guys, and welcome back to Pass and Move. And for today's episode in our Premier League series, we've got the 15th team in the table, and that is Stoke. We've covered everyone up until here in alphabetical order, of course. We've got Swansea, Tottenham, Watford, West Brom, and West Ham left to do. So if any of these are your teams, then keep an eye out. Of course, we'll be covering them as well. If anyone has any of these teams, you can definitely check those videos out on my channel in the playlist for the tactics and team guide. So just to speak very generally, tactics and team guide, of course, is just like the title says. We'll be trying to set you up the best way possible in terms of tactics, formation, using the players, all that sort of business, trying to bring out the best out of the squad as a whole as well, and so that we could give you the best chance to perform with Stoke in the league. Team guide in general is just telling you maybe who you should sell, who you should try and build the team around, who you should keep, areas that might need investment in, for example, and that's kind of it. Obviously, we'll cover some of these tabs very briefly, but that's the main purpose of this episode. So just briefly, we'll be talking about Stoke, why you should manage them. So very interesting team to take over. They've sort of always been a mid-table team here or thereabouts, but you do want to take them to the next level and get them European football, more importantly, because I don't think they've ever been in European football for that matter. But at the same time, you just really want to get them away from mediocrity, I suppose. Mark Hughes has been trying that in recent times, and he's been trying to change the DNA of the club, so to speak, and he's somewhat done that successfully. But you want to take this club to the next level and create your own history with them. So you've got some rivalries. Apparently Arsenal's one of them. Crewe, Port Vale you probably won't ever really face unless it's cup competitions. You've got West Brom as well, and Wolves will be probably also a cup competition. But history wise though, you kind of got a clean slate. You've got championships here, a League Cup, Sky Bet League 1, Czech Red Trophy, and an English Third Division North. So you could definitely do some improvement in terms of winning cup competitions, and of course eventually aim for the Premier League. But really, plenty to build on here. So it's an exciting time to take over Stoke City, where they're no longer considered to be the team who just pump the ball forward and that's sort of it. Obviously they've still got some of that squad DNA, I suppose, or characteristic left over, but not so much. They've sort of tried to invest in ball playing players, and they've done that relatively successfully. So one of the first things I like to do when I'm taking over a team is actually go to the coaching staff. Well, staff in general I'll try to sort out, but the coaching staff in particular, I do mess around with and try and fix up. But what we have to work with what we've got here today. So the reason I do that is actually try and find who has the best judgment of ability amongst my staff, whose opinion I can trust most in terms of whether my players are good enough or not good enough, and their pros and their cons and the strengths and weaknesses and all that sort of business. So it looks like the head of youth development, which is a good staff member to be able to trust. Gareth Jennings is the one, and judgment of potential ability is quite good too. So a little disappointing that your assistant manager is not too good in judgment of ability, but we'll trust Gareth Jennings and see where that takes us. Another thing I like to do is actually head down to the under-23s. I think I already did it for the Stoke squad, so you might see some players there that aren't necessarily supposed to be there. But I go to the under-23s, include the under-18s, and then I add, I check if anyone's overage who should be in the first team squad, just based on age, not even in terms of ability. Anyone over the age of 23. So I think we've already moved them. And these three here are out on loan anyways, and you can't recall any of them, disappointingly, because we would have loved to have Boyan here. And then the next thing is actually sort them out by ability and see if there's any youngsters ready for first team action. So the best out of the under-23s and under-18s apparently is Harry Sutar, and he's only a Sky Bet League 2 player. Where's the person we said we would trust? It was Gareth Jennings, wasn't it? Yeah, 12, 14. Yeah, Sky Bet League 2 football, so nowhere near ready first team action. Apparently he isn't far according to this coach summary, but really Sky Bet League 2 is not even close. So you don't need to necessarily promote anyone from the youth teams. Next thing to do is just have a quick look at the squad overall, just to sort them out by position and see whether you can sort of put together a team shape, a formation, just by looking at the players and seeing whether you can make a formation really out of it. So it looks like we've got a couple of goalkeepers, fullbacks, centre-backs, central midfielders, bunch of wingers, attacking midfielders, and a striker. So the most sensible thing would be to go with a 4-2-3-1, but that's a bit too attacking for our liking. And so I think the most logical thing might actually be for 4-4-1-1. So let's have a quick have a quick look at the number of players we have at the squad. So look, we've got 24. If you ask me, I like to have a squad of 22 people. 22 players. And the reason is that I like to have a starting 11 of leading star or world-class players and a backup 11 of youngsters who have potential to become leading star or world-class players. And that way you have a nice little balance in your squad, good squad depth overall as well, and players who are seriously competing with each other for a first team spot or a starting 11 spot. So 24 is good because that means we've got excess numbers, but the question is, do we have the numbers in the right positions, and do we have the correct ability that we need? So of course Stoke are a mid-table team, so you can't expect them to straight away have leading players, but we can at least set a bar or a standard of having good player abilities minimum, and then you can eventually move that up to leading player when the time comes. But I feel like setting the bar at good is good enough for this Stoke team, and we can eventually build from that as well. So bearing in mind we know the formation, and bearing in mind we know the the squad numbers, I suppose, we can actually start to see whether we've got the correct players in the correct positions, and who should be a starting 11 player and who should be a backup 11 player. So you've got 3 goalkeepers, which is, I guess, a good thing, but of very good ability. Jack Butland, a good player for most Premier League sides, and he's potential to be a leading goalkeeper as well, so this is a perfect player to have. Obviously the better one would be leading, but this is the most realistic we've got working with. So Jack Butland's going to be our starting goalkeeper, and you should not aim to replace him anytime soon. Jacob, though, is just a Sky Bet League 1 side goalkeeper, so that's worrying, and a championship player in Lee Grant. So Jacob is not welcome here at all, in truth, and you should transfer list him. We've got the numbers, so you can, send them off with confidence, and you'll get 10k wages off your budget and 400k hopefully in terms of value. Lee Grant, though, is also not good enough in truth, but at least he's a secure number, I suppose. A championship player, you should be aiming for good at least. So my advice would be to try and move Lee Grant on and bring in a youngster who has potential to overtake or compete at least with Butland, since Butland's a youngster himself. But really, I'm going to mention this like I always do in all my episodes: do not sell first and then buy a player, because you never know whether, if you sell, let's say for example you sell Lee Grant 2.6 million, 30k wages. First of all, you might not necessarily get all of this money. Second of all, the player that you might try to bring in might not be worth this money, just mentioning. And at the same time, he might change his mind, he might suddenly become unavailable, might move to another club, you might have contract issues, for example, and then suddenly you're left with just one goalkeeper, Jack Butland, and you're short of numbers, and you might have a bit of cash but no one to really bring in, and that's more worrying. So ability obviously is a concern, but the main concern is actually just having the numbers needed to really compete in a bunch of different competitions. And so Lee Grant, championship player, but at least he makes up the numbers. So try and bring in a young goalkeeper first, and then sell Lee Grant on, and that way you're okay. But at least a starting 11 player is a strong player, not playing with a decent goalkeeper, for example. You're playing with a good Premier League player goalkeeper. So right backs, Glenn Johnson and Geoff Cameron by the looks of it. But let's actually have a look at them individually and see if they're both suited for it. So Cameron can play as a centre midfielder, defensive midfielder, centre back, and even a right back as well. So a couple of positions there, but it looks like we might need him most at right back, so we'll be playing him there. He can definitely do the job there, most comfortable role as well. Gets into opposition area is going to be a bit of a concern since he's a fullback, but yeah, American international, decent crossing. By the looks of it, okay, apparently he's been at Stoke for a while. To be honest, I honestly had no clue who he was, and I thought they just bought him. But either way, we need him at right back, so that's where we'll be playing him in at the moment. Let's see though if they're good enough ability. So Glenn Johnson's just a championship player, and that's a bit of a worry. But hopefully Geoff is good enough, and no, he's a championship player. So you've got 2 championship players, and by the looks of it, both of them are susceptible to injuries, and that's a big concern. Not only are they not good enough for the Premier League, but they're also susceptible to injuries and likely to miss huge chunks of game time. So Johnson himself is 6.25 million valued, and 30k wages, English international. You've got good experience at least, but they're definitely not good enough for the squad. And 8.75 million here, and really the balance that you should be trying to aim for, I think. Johnson's been at Stoke for a while as well, so you should be able to move both players on fairly easily. But the balance that you're looking for is like what we mentioned. Try and sell both Johnson and Cameron. Bring in a good Premier League player. Obviously, if you could get a leading one, that's even better. And then a backup youngster with potential, because this balance here is not good. 2 old players, 2 susceptible to injury players, and 2 players who are not good enough for the Premier League. Obviously, it'll have to be gradual, that moving them on and whatnot, but just know that you have an area of concern in the right back spot in particular, because you do have the numbers but you don't have quality at all, so it's a bit of an area of concern. We'll see if there's any other areas that are short of numbers which might need more immediate attention, but keep an eye on the right back spot. But yeah, for now, obviously Geoff Cameron will be our leading right back, since he is a bit better than Glenn Johnson. Central defenders, we've got Shawcross, Wimmer, Zuma, not Josh Timon, but I think Eric Peters. No, not Eric Peters. Bruno sounds... Yeah, he's a centre-back. He's not even a natural in the left-back position, but apparently he's his most comfortable role. But we do need the numbers in central defence, so we'll be moving him to centre-back. So if we can have a look at the players now. Zuma is a loan player from Chelsea. I don't think you can buy him by the looks of it. No, it's not included in the options. But you can make the most out of it. He's a good player for most Premier League sides, so he should be a starting player by the looks of things. I think he'll be expecting first team football. Yeah, he is. You've also got Kevin Wimmer, who's a good player and can improve by a slight amount. So you never know if he can become a leading goalkeeper, leading centre-back or not. You've got Ryan Shawcross, as well as a good playing Premier League player. So this is a bit of an issue. It looks like you have a lot of strength in the centre-back position, and Bruno Martins Indi is another good centre-back. I really considered playing 3 centre-backs to try and make the best out of these 4 here. But not only were we short of numbers in terms of centre-backs, because you would need 6 if you had 3 centre-backs. 2 players per position, but at the same time it also meant that other players with good ability would not be able to be playing in their positions and whatnot. If you play 3 centre-backs, you can't necessarily play wingers high up the field and all that sort of business. Wingers would have to be defensive wingers or wing-backs who obviously come back to defend or whatnot. We don't necessarily have either player, so you're just going to have to deal with a good squad depth. It's a bit of a good issue to have, but it is a bit of an issue because a lot of these players are expecting first team football. All 4 of your centre-backs are expecting first-team football, so you're going to have to do really well to balance and juggle them. If you ask me, you can risk upsetting Zuma, even though he's the best centre-back at the club at the moment, but you can risk upsetting him because he's just a lone player. You don't really necessarily have too much obligation to play him. Your worry would be that Chelsea can recall him, but by the looks of things, only you can terminate the loan, and they can't necessarily recall him. And if they do, I think you can just replace him with someone else. So if you ask me, it's best to actually go with Ryan Shawcross and Kevin Wimmer as your centre backs. Try and trust players that you actually have amongst your squad and are obligated to, with the contract to perform. And that way, you've got Shawcross and Wimmer there. And to be honest, playing Bruno Martins Indi as a left back seems to make the most sense, because Eric Peters, even though he's a decent player for most Premier League sides, Bruno Martins is apparently a better left back. Better in terms of ability, but by the looks of it, he's not actually better in terms of playing at the left back spot. So you know what, Bruno's just gonna have to deal with not being a first teamer, and you have a very capable squad depth there in Zuma and Indi being backup players, so no real need for improvement. You can try and juggle them there as much as possible for game time, but if anyone complains of game time, just sell that player off and bring in a youngster with potential who's happy to be a rotational option, and that gives you better squad depth, and your players won't have any real cause to upset the apple cart, so to speak. That leaves you with 2 left backs. Josh Timon, who's definitely not good enough. Sky Bet League 1 football. I guess he's a decent rotational option, but you should be aiming for better. If you ask me, loan Josh Timon out and bring a lone player at left back. I think you could actually even invest in an actual left back, if you ask me. Considering the players that you haven't, Eric Peters is just a decent player. You're better off loaning off Josh Timon and bringing in a good, or leading obviously, Premier League left back, and demote Eric Peters to rotational football, because he's not good enough for the first team and he's susceptible to injuries. At least he's good enough for the division, but for the first team, we're trying to aim for a bit higher than that. So that moves us to central midfielders. We need 4 of them since we're playing 4-4-1-1. That's Darren Fletcher, Charlie Adam, and Joe Allen. By the looks of it, that's just 3. Maybe we can find someone who plays in a different position. Shaqiri is attacking midfielder. Stephen Ireland, possibly. Ramadan Subhi is attacking midfielder. Afellay, winger. Maxime, Jesse. Alright, so I think you know what you could do. How long is Stephen out for? 7 weeks, 3 months. Okay, that's alright. You can include Stephen Ireland amongst the central midfielders. I feel like that will suit him a hint better, particularly because of the way we're playing, and at the same time, since he's getting a little older, I suppose it would make more sense to start to retrain him as a central midfielder to try and get the best out of him. He's not that old yet, 30 years of age. He's still got decent physicals. But we do need the numbers. It is a bit of a, you kind of have a decision to make, but we'll consider other players' positions as well, and we'll see how it goes. But for now, let's see whether we've got the good enough players, for the starting 11. So Darren Fletcher, a good player for most Premier League sides, ideal role model for youngsters, so that's a perfect player to have, ball-winning midfielder, and I think he should definitely be a starting 11 player. You've got Charlie Adam there, championship player, huge worry, should be moving him on and having better squad depth, but at least Joe Allen's another starting player, a good player for most Premier League sides, a deep line playmaker as well, and there you go, your starting combination there, starting partnership seems to be good enough. Stephen Ireland, those just a championship player, so another area of concern. You may want to not consider him as a backup, because your central midfield, the squad depth of this squad in truth is not good enough. And Ireland is a championship player, as well as Adam being a championship player, so the squad depth in terms of the central midfield position in particular is a bit of a worry. I think right back's definitely more of a concern, because both the players are championship players. At least central midfield, you've got two who are ready for first team football, but if anything happens to Fletcher or Allen, that's a serious area of concern. Julian Ngoy, Diouf, Shaqiri, Ramadan Subhi, Ibrahim Afellay. I can't even believe he's 31, by the way. I honestly thought he's still considered a youngster. Dutch international. Can't believe he's been around for this long. I really thought that there was no way he was 31 years of age. I actually thought he was a different player entirely when I read his name. I just thought there must be someone else called Ibrahim Afellay, but apparently he's just been around for ages. Jesse you could consider as a winger as well, and that leaves you with two strikers. We're just going on the basis of the role being what's being most comfortable with, but we can adjust as it goes. So Julian, only a Sky Bet League 1 football player, so shouldn't be even be included in the first team. Apparently he's already listed for loan, so let's not even consider him amongst the numbers. It looks like we've got a decent amount. Yeah, so this leaves us with 6. We do need 6 for the attacking midfield position, needs 2, right wing needs 2, and the left wing needs 2 as well. So at least you got the numbers, but the question is, are they in the right areas? So we do want to play Shaqiri, of course, in the right wing position. He appears to be the best in that position. Good play for most Premier League sides. Diouf is only considered a decent player, and he is capable as a striker as well, but we're going to try and use him in the right wing position. Oh, he's only a little bit comfortable, but we're going to try and use him in the right wing position. I think he is technically best as a Rodomantor, but that doesn't suit our tactics, and considering he's just a decent player, we shouldn't try and build our tactics around him. We're trying to aim for good players. Really high wages for someone who's only expecting rotational football, but we will be playing in the you're going to have to retrain him as a right wing player, and that leaves you with Shaqiri as well. Afellay is comfortable on either flank, but not so much deeper, but we will be playing him deeper, even though he comes deep to get the ball anyways, cuts inside from both wings, and his attributes will suit our tactic overall. Question is he good enough in terms of ability? He's only a decent player for most Premier League sides. The truth is we're actually going to be playing Maxime there, because he's the best left winger. Good player for most Premier League sides, can be a striker, but I feel like he works a little bit better as a winger, and it's his most natural or most comfortable role, and we already have the striker position fulfilled anyway, so we'll be considering Maxime as the first team player as well. So that leaves you with Afellay and Jesse, who are both backup players. So the truth is you have a bit of a decision to make. I think, if you ask me, you're better off cancelling. Oh, you can't cancel a loan. And why has he got such a huge release clause? Well, anyways, Jesse's only considered a decent player for most Premier League sides. Very susceptible to injuries, very inconsistent, and so he shouldn't be the type of player where you really rely on. As a backup, he's decent, I suppose, good enough considering, Afellay, for example, is a decent player as well. Your better bet might be to actually consider moving on Mame Diouf and playing Afellay as a backup to Shaqiri on the right wing. He's either footed as well, and he could probably do the inverted winger role a little bit better than Diouf, who can only do the Rodomantor role, and even then he can't even do that well. He's Rodomantor is supposed to be able to finish, and he can't even finish. So maybe you'd be better off selling him. 26.5 million you could really do with that money, and the high wages he's on for a rotational player is a bit of an area of concern. So for example, Ibrahim is also a rotational player, but he's only expecting 25k wages, so that's a lot more realistic for a squad or a club of Stoke's standard. So yeah, you maybe want to consider doing that and moving Afellay across, but the concern is that Ramadan Subhi, who is 3-star rating and doesn't actually say that he's a good Premier League player, but I'm going to assume because other players like Shaqiri who are 3-star rating, we would consider Subhi to be our starting attacking midfielder and should be a good player for most Premier League sides. If not, he's got tons of potential anyways, potential to be one of the best players or the best player at the club at the moment. And so we're going to be playing him as an attacking midfielder, leader in terms of his style as well, so that's good to see. He's a youngster though, and you might want to be absolutely ruthless and bring in a starting attacking midfielder. He is only expecting hot prospect type of football, so you know I think he'd be okay with a rotational option. But you know, if you wanted to show some faith in him, you could, and just bring in another young attacking midfielder. If you ask me though, be a bit ruthless and bring in someone who's a bit better than Subhi, and that gives you good balance as well. A prime player and a young player, and that way it's better suited for your team. Just in case Subhi is not good enough, you know, just in case he's just a decent player for most Premier League sides, or not a good one. But that leads us to the striker position. So Peter Crouch and Sadio Berahino are going to be your strikers. Berahino is a good player for most Premier League sides, so he is going to be our starting 11 striker. Crouch now is a bit of an issue because he's a Championship player. And I think 30k wages, 1.2 million, 36 years of age. He really should have been moved on ages ago. I'm still trying to understand how he has pace of 14 with acceleration of 2. But otherwise, all his other attributes actually read quite decently. Dribbling's a bit of an area of concern, but you know, anticipation, composure, finishing off the ball, work rate, for example. He would be very ideal if he was actually ready for Premier League football, but as a backup he is not good enough. So again, you could, this is where you have to make a decision. You could move him on, have Jesse as a backup striker, for example, or even Maxime if you wanted to, but Maxime is a ready player, so it doesn't make sense. Actually, it makes more sense to have Jesse as a backup striker, move on Crouch, and just bring in a left winger who's more suited to play as a backup to Maxime Choupo-Moting as well. So in terms of numbers, you do have the numbers, but you have a couple of areas where you need to you know, you might want to keep an eye on, and some areas of concern. The good news is you have numbers but no real squad depth out of your first team, and you do want to try and push your team from being, you know, decent players into good players. It's a really weird mix of players in truth. You've got some good players, you've got some decent players, and then you've got some players who aren't even ready for the Championship. So you just want to try and kill off as much deadwood as possible in order to really you know, push forward into Europe football, really European football. But in terms of the aims of the board, they expect mid-table football, or position rather, and that's okay for us this season. You should be able to achieve it with the squad you've got. Just hope no major injuries to your first team players. The backup ones you cannot rely on, so you know, try and play the first team as much as possible. In terms of the season preview though, you are expected to end in 11th spot or position in the Premier League, so that's mid-table as well, and that's okay for us now. But if you can push into Europa League spots like the 7th place, then that's okay. You've also obviously got the cup competitions, FA Cup and Carabao Cup, 4th round and 5th round respectively. You should be able to achieve those targets easily, but at the same time take the League Cup with you know, a bit more seriousness than the FA Cup, because if you do win it, you get Europa League football. Either one you win, you can get Europa League football, but obviously the League Cup's a bit more realistic, and so do not take these cup competitions lightly. But yeah, now that we know our squad players, we know who we're trying to build around, we know who's actually starting, we can try and build a tactic. And the one that I've gone for is a 4-4-1-1, the formation we discussed earlier. And really the type of football that we're trying to play is, because we're mid-table, we don't want to be too defensive, but at the same time we don't want to be too attacking. So 4-4-1-1 seems to make the most sense. We're being kind of expressive, we're playing direct football as well, and at the same time we're not playing too expansive by playing a 4-2-3-1, for example. And 4-4-1-1 has good shape, helps playing direct football, and it should work for us quite successfully. So in terms of, you know, trying to play the players in the most suitable positions and most suitable roles, and trying to bring out the best out of the squad, this is what we've gone for in terms of the roles. But just briefly, mentality is control. You can play with an attacking mentality if you wanted to, but we wanted to try and avoid being hit on the counter attack, so that's what the control mentality helps with. We've gone with the structured team shape. I'm not the type of manager who likes too many team structures, so structured team shape helps that. It lets each player do their individual role, in comparison to a team shape of fluid, where the whole team, you can literally see the whole team attacking and defending together. So it would make more sense, since the team is doing everything together, to have a lot of team instructions. That's just my understanding of it. Everyone's got their own understanding, but that's mine, and that's why I've gone with structured. It will help us more defensively as well, considering our instructions that are just use offside trap, use title marking, and more direct passing, it seems to help tie everything together in. So that's kind of it. So in terms of the actual roles, Wimmer is a ball-playing defender, so we're playing him in his natural, role, and it helps us in terms of what we're aiming for. So the type of football we're trying to go for, we're trying to look for players who cross a lot, who dribble a lot, and who shoot a lot. Unfortunately for us, crossing's in a tiny bit of short supply. The good news is we've got fullbacks who cross from deep, which is what we're looking for, since we're playing direct football. So fullback on support on either flank, and inside wingers, or inverted wingers rather, on either flank on attack duty. Chopo, Moting and Shaqiri are both naturally inside forwards. He's actually more of a winger, but since he cuts inside from both wings, you can actually consider him as an inside forward. And so he's very comfortable playing the inverted winger role. Now the problem with both players is it's quite shocking how similar they are, but both of them have poor decision making, which is a bit of an area of concern, and both have poor work rate. And that's it's something you might want to keep your eye out on. But hopefully, as an inverted winger, they shouldn't rely too much on work rate, but decision making is a bit of an area of concern. You're hoping that they would improve the more they play, but definitely very capable as inverted wingers, and they should do the role very comfortably. Chopo's either footed and Shaqiri is left footed, so they can both do it from those flanks. Alan's just playing in his most comfortable role, which is deep line playmaker on defend duty. He shoots less often and holds his position. He's going to be the holding midfielder, of course. Darren Fletcher, in his most preferred position as a ball-winning midfielder, he's just going to be the player who tackles harder. We need someone in the whole squad, really, because no one necessarily does it. So he's the one who's going to be doing that dirty work, and he should be able to do it well. So he best as an advanced playmaker. It's not his most comfortable role. He prefers playing as a shadow striker, but some of his attributes don't necessarily suit it, like finishing and long shots. And I think advanced playmaker is actually what brings out the best attributes in him. If his decision making can improve, then his vision and passing should be okay, and it suits us a bit better. Because we can't play a shadow striker and an advanced forward with Berahino. A shadow striker works best with a deep lying forward, and Berahino unfortunately can't do any of those roles quite well. False 9, he's okay, but lacks the vision for it. For example, Trequartista, we don't want someone holding off from tackles and not really closing the team down. Complete forward on support, he might be okay with, but I feel like a lot of it has to do with physical stuff. Poor jumping reach, no heading, and vision as well is a problem. Strength is not too high either, so it doesn't suit us, and so on and so forth. So we decided to keep him in his best role as advanced forward. You might want to try him out in the poacher role, but advanced forward helps a bit more because they do dribble more than the poacher. But obviously heading is a bit of a concern. Other than that, he can do that role really well. He does try to beat the offside trap and move into channels anyways, which suits the advanced forward. So that's kind of what we've gone with. Shawcross as a central defender, apparently he's not comfortable with, but his attributes suit the role well. And we don't want anyone who's playing as defensive centre-back just knocking the ball forward. You could, because we are playing direct football, to be fair. But I prefer central defender. So if you really wanted to, you can play as a defensive centre-back. Fullbacks on support just complement the inverted winger, so it'll be okay. I prefer to play with wingbacks on support, but they don't cross from deep the same way fullbacks do. But if you're wondering what you should eventually build towards in terms of the tactics, you need to try, like I mentioned, find as much players who dribble, who cross a lot, and who shoot a lot. And so advanced forward seems to be okay with that. Advanced playmaker is okay as well in terms of dribbling. The problem is that they shoot less often. So you might want to actually eventually move towards the shadow striker role if you can. That would mean eventually replacing Berahino. You already have a player ready for it in Subhi, but in terms of the striker, you do want to try and find someone who dribbles a lot, takes a lot of shots, and so I feel like the complete forward on support plays, risky passes, dribbles a lot and stuff, and so that helps us more. You know, defensive forward, not really. Trequartista dribbles, but they don't close down. We need someone who closes down a little bit more. False 9 might be a decent shout. Deep lying forward on support would be, you know, works really well with a shadow striker as well. But complete forward on support is the role to aim for. Shadow striker is the one for attacking midfield. You do want to get wingers eventually here, just natural wingers. If you really wanted to, you could push Shaqiri across into the winger position here, and you know, Choupo-Moting moved him here and as a winger. But the problem is you would have to stop them both, you know, from their natural player trait, which is cut inside from both wings. Deep line playmaker in Allen is, you know, it's a good role to have in terms of holding, and they're still playing, you know, good football and whatnot, but at the same time they shoot less often, which might be a bit of an area, but they are probably the best you know, defensive holding midfielder that you want to aim for. Maybe central defender on defend duty you could go for. Ball winning midfield on defend actually might be your best bet, but they do dribble less, which is a bit of an area of concern. I reckon probably central midfielder on defend duty might suit you best. Ball winning midfielder on support is very good as well, so having that combination would be best, closing down and, you know, tackling hard. And that way you've got a nice little complete squad. Having a ball playing defender is decent in terms of risky passes, but I guess what suits the tactic best is defensive centre backs. But obviously, like I mentioned, I just tend to prefer central defenders. It's really down to preferences, but maybe that's the type of tactic that you should eventually work towards. So that's kind of it in terms of the method of playing. You do want to, you know, bear in mind when opposition teams are playing attacking midfielders, it's a bit of an area of concern that you have no defensive midfielder, like the tactic points out here. And obviously down the flanks you have some minor issues of no real players being in that position, but otherwise you should be okay. So just generally, squad dynamics is already poor when you take over the squad, so that's a bit of an area of concern. Staff, like we mentioned very briefly, you should you know, really overhaul them. You're seriously lacking in some departments. Training, I like to have it on preseason at high, and then during the season on average, and then obviously match preparation I just keep it as is during preseason, but when the season starts I just go with whatever my scout tells me. Schedule, you've got some okay friendlies here, but you eventually want to work towards some better set of friendlies. You have a tough game against Manchester United, and, you know, opening fixtures against Manchester United and Liverpool, but after that you should be okay. Competitions we already talked about. Scouting's been revamped, but with you know, you have to actually have a look at your board, so they don't have any particular restrictions, so maybe you can try and go for world packages for both the senior and youth ones. I think you should be able to afford it. In terms of transfers, no ins or outs, but it looks like you got a decent transfer budget there of 27 million with about 100k wages to spare. But if you ask me, I like to have it in the middle, leaning towards the right in terms of the transfer budget, and that way you might actually have more like 300k wages and 17 million to spend, which is still okay. And you should be able to do it okay with that type of money. You got 38 million, so even if you spend that 27 million, you're hugely risking your financial status by leaving just 10 million in the bank. But I think otherwise you're okay. There's a gift loan, no other real debts, so you should be alright financially. Your balance seems to improve for a short while, then suddenly drop for some strange reason. But if you stay in the Premier League and you get Premier League money, TV money, and, you know, the higher that you end in terms of position, the more money you get in. Of course, if you get into Europa League football, your finances improve even more, so that should help. And that would hopefully turn these reds into greens instead. But transfer budgets of 50 million, 60 million and 68 million, you can do some serious damage with this money if you played it smart and you know, really did get rid of the deadwood. So I feel like we covered everything today. So if you did enjoy the episode, then of course please do hit the like button and subscribe for more daily Football Manager 2018 content. And as always guys, thank you all very much for watching.